Good evening to one and all present here. Welcome to our sixth episode of Dr. Paulos Gregorios study series. May I now invite Reverend Father Cherian Joseph for leading us in the prayer.
Barakmor, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts and sins, as we also have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Once again, I extend a warm welcome to all of you to our sixth episode of Dr. Paulos Gregorios study series, organized by MGOCSM Delhi Study Wing. On behalf of MGOCSM Delhi Diocese, I take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed resource person for the evening, Reverend Father Dr. Jossi Jacob, Principal of St. Thomas Orthodox Theological Seminary, Nagpur. Achin is also the Director of the Orthodox Syrian Sunday School Association of the East outside Kerala region. I also extend a hearty welcome to our diverse panelists, Ms. Blessy K. Abraham from St. Thomas Orthodox Church, Sarita, Vihar, and Mr. Eldhose Joseph from St. Thomas Church, Ghaziabad. Along with the panelists, we also have our MGOCSM members from various units of Delhi Diocese attending today's episode. I, Ms. Ananya Elizabeth Varghese, along with Ms. Febha Mariam Panicker, will be the moderators for the evening. The theme for today's episode is the coming of the great civilization shift, written by His Grace Dr. Paulos Gregorios. It was a plenary address delivered by Tirumeni at the 19th International Conference on the Unity of Science at Seoul in 1992. Tirumeni here talks about the three dimensions of secular principle, which are healing, education, and the political economy. I would just like to, put forward my interpretation of this article in a few lines. When it comes to healing, what Tirumeni is trying to say is that we must all move towards a holistic healing approach. I'm sure you all must be aware what holistic healing means. Holistic healing is an approach which involves an overall healing of our body, mind, and spirit, right? But what we see in today's time is that with advancement of technologies, there is enormous advancement that has taken place in technology, because of which people are relying more and more in these advanced technologies rather than shifting towards a holistic approach of healing. Another point that I feel we should take note here is that advancement of any type of technology has its own pros and cons, right? For example, we can misuse the advancement of technology. On one hand, if we are finding, a vaccine for a deadly virus, or we are finding treatment for cancer or AIDS. On the other hand, we can even misuse that by making a nuclear weapon, like the case that happened in Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So whatever advancements that we try to create, it can be in technology, it can be in the field of medical science, we must have certain limitations. We must not cross those limits. And also, as Tirumeni says in this article, a holistic approach towards healing can be possible with the help of individuals, with the help of initiatives taken by various communities. Here, I would like to also say that prayer, fasting, meditation, they all hold an integral part to lead towards a holistic approach of healing. Secondly, when Tirumeni talks about education, he says that we must emphasize on value-based education. What we used to see in our schools earlier was that it was all a marks-based system. The student who scores more marks was considered the smartest, right? But now I feel it has changed, especially with the coming of the new education policy, which was proposed by HRD ministry. Emphasis has been given for the overall development of a child. Emphasis has been given towards quality education rather than marks-based education. for critical thinking, as well as, there is equal division for extracurriculars as well as for academics. Importance has been equally given for extracurriculars as well. But what I can proudly say right now is that in order to provide value-based education system, our church, especially our Malankara Orthodox Church, plays a very important role. Because it is from my experience that I'm saying this, because I have inculcated majority of the values in my life through Sunday school, especially through Sunday school, also MGOCSM. And I'm sure further when I join OCYM from there also, I'll be able to inculcate many new values. Febha, what do you think? What are your views on these lines?
Thank you, Ananya. And I think you have really put all the points very concisely, and it's a really like, I don't know what to add on, but reading the article was really, really interesting. And seeing how this article has been addressed to, I suppose it's a group of scientists. I think so. It's been addressed to a group of scientists.
Yes, yes.
Trying to understand how Tirumeni has actually, in the age of so much of resistance between science and religion, how Tirumeni has tried to bridge that gap through this address has been something which is really interesting for me to see. So like, I think this has been delivered in the year 1992, and seeing the progressive ideas of Tirumeni in the area of trying to bridge the gap between science and religion is really interesting to see how he has talked about all these areas. He's even mentioned, I think, something about secularism, how
yes,
people from different religions can work together to bridge the gap between science and religion. And I think one of the major points which stands out for me is education, because being an educator myself, that is something which really, really stands out for me. And trying to understand that someone was talking about these things back in 1992 is something which is really amazing, because these are issues which are absolutely something which are, when we talk about education, it's something that is being highly monetized. People are making money. It's like a business now, right? And here he's talking about how schools are not just places where we should be focusing on academics, but also on value education. And even though schools are doing that, but we don't know how effective it is, right? And what else can be done. So the whole idea of shifting, that shift that he talked about, how the civilization needs to like shift to something new, to lay some sort of foundations for a better civilization. All that is something which is really interesting, and I would love to hear more about it from our resource person, of course.
Here,
So,
I would just
here are
like
ideas.
I would just like to add one more point, is that the most beautiful part of this article which I found was Gregorios Tirumeni had already foreseen the challenges that we are currently facing, may it be in the education system, may it be in healing, may it be in political economy. So that beauty that he had already foreseen these challenges, and since he has written this in the year 1992, so that itself is commendable, I feel. In order to throw some more light on this article, may I now invite our esteemed resource person for the evening, Reverend Father Dr. Jossi Jacob, Principal of St. Thomas Orthodox Theological Seminary, Nagpur. Over to you, Acha.
Thank you, Ananya. I found this article very much an interesting one, because this is something which we have to discuss in a serious manner to understand ourselves, our own perspectives, and our own value systems, which we think the right one. Gregorios Tirumeni has defined the cultural modernity in a wonderful manner in one single sentence. I don't think that anybody else could do that in that such a great, in a precise manner. That Gregorios Tirumeni's simple interpretation or simple definition of the simple comment on the cultural modernity is like this. He says, cultural modernity is having two major aspects of it. One, the declaration of the autonomy of human rationality and the eclipse of God. That itself is clearly a wonderful statement, and I think the whole summary of the background of this article is there. The cultural modernity is the declaration, self-declaration of the autonomy of human rationality. That means human beings, or the whole human society, began to rely too much on human rationality, and that reliance has brought a problem, that the eclipse of God. God has been eclipsed. Nothing happened to God, but God has been eclipsed. He has been, he became invisible, or he lost his connection with the humanity, or humanity has got its rationality is overgrown, which blocked the sight of God, the vision of God. That is what he says, and that is I prefer to bring it as the background of this article, or the topics which we are discussing. So basically, what Tirumeni has mentioned in the article, as I understand, is that in the context of modernity, two are the major political principles. One, the urban Marxist and the urban capitalist. And when Tirumeni was writing it in 1992, the communism began to die off from the whole system, but it was still there, existing somewhere here and there. In 1992, Soviet Union was almost collapsed, and then in some parts of the world, the communism was still existing during that time. It was existing when he was making this comment. But after that, communism has almost been out from the whole world polity. But capitalism also has turned into neoliberalism. And then neoliberalism is more dangerous than these two, I think. Anyway, we are not entering into the discussion about it. And second point, which I want to mention, is that, when coming to the eastern side of the eastern hemisphere of the globe, we could see cultural diversities and different value systems, which could be regarded as much higher in the holistic approach, or much better in holistic approach than the Western oriented systems. But unfortunately, the prevalent system, or the controlling people, were following the Western system of education because they were trained in the Western. Tirumeni clearly mentions it. Intellectuals in Asia, it's in page 1, third paragraph. Intellectuals in Asia, having been largely formed and trained in the cultural and educational system of the global, urban, industrial, secular, scientific, technological civilization, seem hardly able to question radically or transcend fundamentally their dogmatic faith in science, technology, and in the secular principle and policy. That means the control of the West over the East also is very significant. And then in one way or other, we could say that the way in which we are trained to think, it's a Western way of thinking. And we claim that we are Easterners, but we are trained to think. And we may claim that we are free thinkers, but I don't think that anybody is a free thinker, because we are trained to think from joining the play school or the lower kindergarten, and then coming up to a PhD or a postdoctorate and all. We are trained to think, and then we have been taught a methodology to think, and then we may make some comments within that methodological framework of thinking. So we are not free thinkers. So our thinking pattern has been totally dominated by and totally conditioned by the Western ways of thinking. And this is not a new thing. And then I prefer to read one small sentence from a famous existentialistic philosopher of 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre. And then he mentioned it he wrote a beautiful introduction to the book of Frantz Fanon, a post-colonial, anti-colonial writer from Africa. Of course, he was a francophone writer. And then in the introduction to the book Wretched of the Earth, Sartre writes, the European elite undertook to manufacture a native elite. They picked out promising adolescents. They branded them as with red hot iron with the principles of Western culture. They stuffed their mouth full with high sounding phrases, grand gluttonous words that stuck to the teeth. I'm not repeating because our time is not that much sufficient for all this discussion. So what I just want to highlight is that what Tirumeni mentions here is something, a policy of the colonial people, of the colonialists. So they used to take people, the bright youngsters, and then they teach them, train them in Western patterns of education, and then they bring them back to rule the whole of the people here in their own native country. And that in that manner, the colonialism was used as a tool to form out the patterns of thinking of people. So we are enslaved to that one. That is the first thing which I understood from Tirumeni's introduction to this article. And then Three are the major aspects or major areas in which this issue has affected, or this perspective of the whole humanity, the perspectival change of the East. Of course, it is a perspective of the modern West affected. That is, Ananya has already mentioned, healing, education, and political economy. While coming to healing, again, I recall one of the very beautiful expressions of Tirumeni about healing. When he was making a lecture on the holistic healing, and he made a wonderful statement that two of the major problems of current world: over chemicalization of the body and over chemicalization of the earth. Over chemicalization of body and over chemicalization of the earth. Now, at present, healing is almost understood as keeping the chemical balance of the human body. That's it, nothing more than that. If a medical doctor can keep the balance of the chemical balance of the human body, then he can claim that the patient is healed or he's cured. So this is healing. I don't know how far we can call it and we can recognize it as healing. Now the problem is that the body is counted as a separate object. This subject-object distinction is very much imparted into the system of medicine, that doctors are treating an object, even though we can count it, or they may be counting it as a living object. So that objectification of human body and then treating it as a chemically balanced system, and then keeping the chemical balance of it is considered to be healing. So that itself is a major problem, and the holistic approach of healing is to be properly brought into the understanding of this healing system. And alternative, when he's mentioning about alternative medicines, and then these alternative medicines, especially we can highlight the Ayurveda as one of the best examples. It is considering the person, healing of the person, not keeping the chemical balance of the body, healing of the person, and that considering human being as a person, having physical, mental, and spiritual aspects, or spiritual dimensions of existence. And that is something which we have to highlight here. And I'm one of the major issues of healing is that we are objectifying human body as if it is something to be treated with chemical infusions, or keeping chemical balance itself is healing. That is of course it is very much well highlighted here. And then the next one is the concept of education. Education system is now changing into a different direction. In the Western system, Western countries, or in the whole of the world, including in India, we began to think of exploring new ways of education. But I don't know how far it is acceptable, how far it became acceptable to the mindset of majority of the people, especially parents. In neoliberalism is demanding a lot of workforce, and I don't think that we are really providing education to human children. I used to say in many of my lectures that the majority of the schools are treating kids as learning machines and not as human children. No, they don't consider them as growing persons, and they consider them as learning machines. And then I'm so sorry that we could notice it here in the Sunday school also. And you have already mentioned that I'm working with the Sunday school in OSSI. That means many of the parents used to make inquiries about the grades after the result is published of the 10th and 12th. And I just insisted the Achan who is working there not to reply, not to give a proper reply, because this is not a grade hunting. This is not a space for grade hunting, and Sunday school has a very, very particular purpose of bringing a value system, imparting a value system into the minds of the people. And if it's not happening, if they are simply seeking grades there, and then what is the purpose of it? And they fail. And then in this system of education, what we are being trained is to be workforce. I think you agree with me. We are training our children to be workforce, not as human beings. So
Yes.
I would recall one of the father's sayings. Actually, he's the 4th century church father, Saint Ephraim. It's not in the article, but when I read the article, I remembered that, and I wish to mention it to you, that Ephraim the Syrian, and many of you might have heard of him, Ephraim the Syrian of 4th century. He was born in 306 and died in 373. Born in Nizibis and died in Edessa. And then he was a wonderful poet, and then many of the hymns which we are using in the liturgy are written by him, Ephraim the Syrian, or Saint Ephraim. Then he mentioned about education, three different types of education. He says education we can approach education in 3 different ways. One, learning with passion. Learning without passion. Learning without passion. I don't have any passion to learn a particular subject, but it is important for me, for my survival, for seeking livelihood, and then I can make my life of it. So I am forced to learn that. Maybe internally or externally, I am forced to learn that. Learning without passion, that is meaningless, because it doesn't contribute anything to my soul. It doesn't contribute anything to my mind. It doesn't give me any pleasure. It doesn't give me any pleasure of learning. Second is learning with passion. And learning with passion, he says that while we learn with passion, we are not really focusing on what we are learning, but we are making a kind of battle against the subject which we to conquer. Our interest is just to conquer the subject and not to understand it. Just conquering it and completely comprehending it, and then we are trying to be like warriors, making a war against the subjects which we are learning. The third approach is the most beautiful, he says, learning with love and wonder. Learning with love and wonder. Learning with love and wonder. I learn something and then I love it and then I wonder about it. And this is the approach which he suggests to use about God. And I believe that it is a very good approach of learning. And then we impart values into the minds of the people. What are we learning is a question, of course, it is important. How do we learn? Tirumeni mentions it very clearly that, the topics which we are learning are important, but at the same time, the whole education system has to form out good human persons with proper values in their mind, and then with proper perspectives of respecting others and accepting others' right and all sort of things, and good persons to be, fitting to live in a society peacefully. And then in regard to the religious learning, that many has mentioned here, the religious learning like Sunday schools and all sort of religious education which we are providing to the children, we are making it as a separate compartment. This compartmentalization in education is a serious problem. Compartmentalization in education. Sunday school, the very term itself is very clear, making the idea very clear. School functioning on Sundays. Sunday school. I'm not making any comment against that particular expression. Sundays school. And this is something only for Sunday. We are keeping religion and religious understandings and only for Sunday. It's a business for Sundays and not for Monday up to Saturday. Monday up to Saturday, we live a secular life, and then Sunday we will have a religious life. So the religious education is limited to Sundays, and then that is a problem. That itself is a problem. That doesn't mean that Sunday school is the problem, but that attitude of and pushing it down to the margins of our life. Pushing it down to the margins of our life, that itself is a problem. And then how far we are keeping our religious understanding as a flavor of life, as a flavor of our perspectives, as something which guides us in our own understanding, developing our own understandings, in developing our own perspectives, and in developing our own ways of thinking. That is a question. How far the religious ethos makes us conditioned in our thinking and in our activities, in our relationship with others, and then all these things are clearly raised as questions by Tirumeni, and Tirumeni is so much, I'm so happy to say that Tirumeni was my greatest professor, and then I was a student of Tirumeni when I was in the seminary in Kottayam. I was studying in seminary in Kottayam in late 80s and early 90s. So Tirumeni's understanding was always enlightening us in a way that Tirumeni never divided the secular from the sacred. Sacred, profane discrimination or distinction itself, Tirumeni, it was totally out of Tirumeni's understandings. And Tirumeni always say, we are living a life in a world which is a chance provided by God. And this whole world is created by God, and our chance to live in this world also is a gift which we have received from God. So we cannot separate God and the world which He has created, which He has provided us. And here, the education, in educative systems, we cannot separate religious understandings and the secular ones. That means science is not against religion, but the total education has to function as a single unit to form out human beings into good persons, especially, of course, experts in different areas for that is needed. And then science, the function of science is quite an important thing, and science and technology is quite an important thing. But at the same time, the human beings should not go for an option either to opt science and technology or to opt religion, and then we cannot count religion and science as two opposing ideas, and then we cannot count them as something which always mismatch. That is an idea that many wants to highlight here. So keeping the religion and religious ethos always active in the society. One of the major problems Tirumeni makes clear here is that religion is presented as a private business. It's a private business. And then the secular is ruling. Secular principles are ruling there, and secular is providing a space for the religion. And if anybody wants to practice religion, they can do it. And secular system will provide a space for religion in the system. The system will be controlled by the secular principles. Secular is a product of European Enlightenment, which began in 19th century. Secular means totally, what's it called? It literally means it's related to the time. The major principles of secularism as an ideology is that it denies all the understandings of religion and all God concepts and God talks, and everything will be counted as not important and not generally acceptable, but a space will be provided for the people who wants to hold that, and people can do it as a private business and not a public one. And then the basic idea of this secularism is what I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this conversation, that human rationality is to be regarded as the yardstick to measure everything. Everything has to be measured based on human rationality. And then religion, it cannot be rationally justified completely. Of course, religion is very much, religion gives a lot of space for application of rationality, but no religion can be totally justified or totally defined using human rationality, because religion speaks of God and God is beyond human rationality. So naturally, religion cannot be totally defined based on human rationality. So in secular system, human rationality prevails, and it is the dominant perspective, the principle which rules the whole system. So religion cannot be given any chance to be there in the public realm. That is what Tirumeni mentioned secondly. And then Tirumeni is arguing that itself is a problem, that religion has been pushed down to the corners. And there, another problem comes, that every religion is given a space for it, and that is isolated from the other religion. So religious fanaticism became a problem. I'm practicing my religion with a group of people whom are totally accepting my religion as their own religion, or whom are sharing the same faith, and then I'm developing all ideas together with them, and then there is no chance for me to interact with the other people to know what they think of my religion in a social setting. So I don't have any chance to. Then all the religions are developing in different compartments in the same civil society, and then religions are eventually losing their chance to interact each other and to creatively contribute to the betterment of the civil society and for the whole human society. That is another problem that Mary is highlighting in this article about this pushing off the religions into separate corners where each religion is given private space. So I live in my private space, and my life and my way of life is totally a business of mine and not the business of others. And then while coming to religion, the goodness of Christianity and goodness of Hinduism or goodness of Islam or any other religion has to contribute to the mainstream civil society. That is what Tirumeni mentions here. Tirumeni speaks of a single religious community and its problems. He speaks of it in this article itself. A singular religious community will have problems of its own, definitions of ethics and the way in which it defines the ethos of the whole society. So it is better to have interactions between the religion in a healthy manner, and then let the religions jointly contribute to the betterment of the civil society, and that will be healthier system. And then Tirumeni doesn't argue to incorporate religious ideas into the curriculum, but Tirumeni implicitly mentions that the values are to be added. Value system is important. When we complete our education, we have to develop certain values, and we are not supposed to learn these are the values. You just make it by heart, and then you have to tell me tomorrow what are the values, and then that is not the way in which we have to learn values. But eventually, through education, we have to develop our own values, and we have to become good human beings, having values in our mind. Not specifically studied as a subject. That's what Tirumeni highlights, and that's really a wonderful idea which I have noticed here. And then coming to the political economy, of course, Tirumeni mentions in the very introduction that the modern democratic state is a creation of the West and bears the marks of its history. And then there also Tirumeni mentions about the religion, and then religion and its authority, how the religions are involving into the social political realm. Now I have mentioned that when a religion is acting in its own separate private space, then it feels to negotiate for power in the political system. Their religion, the interaction between the religion and the political system, or religion of the civil society, which is ruled by the political system, will be like two-party negotiations, and that will bring unhealthy trends into the society, and that may bring their religion may cause the separation of human beings into different groups, arguing for their own rights and all. And then second problem which is possible to develop there is that how do I define my identity, my political identity, or my social identity, and my personal identity. And if this sort of a separation of religion from the society, from the mainstream of the society, where secularism rules, one of the major problems could occur, that I define myself totally based or mainly based on my religious identity, and then that could make problems, or that could make me a little bit detached from, may not be a little bit, maybe more detached from the other people, and then seeing people as totally based on their religions, and religion may become the major aspect of determining my identity. And I don't think that is quite an important thing. Of course, religion is not something to be accepted as an aspect determining my identity, but it must make me a better human being. And it must make me a better human being, properly connected to God, and properly connected to the remaining of the humanity, and properly connected to the nature. And that is Tirumeni is implicitly mentioning it here. So purpose of religion is to keep humanity connected to God, keep humanity together. That means, each one connected to the others, the fellow human beings, and connected to the whole nature too. Then only the purpose of religion is being fulfilled, and then otherwise religion is simply wrongly functioning in its and it's not providing, it's deviating from its actual purpose. That is also there. And then finally, the totality, the value system is being collapsed because of the issues of all these issues, all this secularism in a way that human rationality prevails in all the systems and God is eclipsed. That's what I said in the beginning, and I'm concluding with that. The human rationality became overgrown in a way that it has blocked the vision of God from humanity. And when light is gone, then we lost our understanding of the totality. We lost our understanding of the totality. And then our vision is too much localized into science or into something else. And then when we turn to one side, we see something. When we turn to the other side, we see something. And when the source of light is blocked, because that means when God is blocked, when the vision of God is blocked by the overgrown human rationality, then the problems occur. And then we have to regain that. And of course, human rationality and its growth is quite an important thing, but we have to overcome, and we shouldn't allow it to block the vision of God. That is what totally I have to mention from this article. And I'm sure that I haven't mentioned many of the points which Tirumeni has beautifully articulated here in this article, but I'm so happy that you have extended this chance to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acha, for elucidating Gregorios Tirumeni's thoughts in such a simplified way that we all could connect with. The floor is now open for panel discussion. I request all our panelists, also our audience, to raise their hands in order to put forward their queries and suggestions regarding this article. Yes, so we have Blessy K. Abraham, our first panelist. Blessy, the floor is now open for your questions. You may go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. So I would like to quote Tirumeni and say that Tirumeni said that modern science and secular principle find religion and God irrelevant to its pursuit. So science believe in proof and in what they can see and what they can feel, like rationality in what you said. So God, religion, and transcendence make sense only when they're subjected to investigation by modern methods of science. So what do you think, or how do you suggest that you make a case to correlate science, modern science, with religion, so that the youth currently can pursue religion and science together? So what do you suggest?
I would suggest that the problem is with the perspective of knowledge, and then how do we know the methodology to know? I think I have already mentioned it somehow, the methodology of knowing, and then we are counting everything as other than myself as an object. So this subject-object distinction is so strong that I look around everything as and I can see only objects. That's one thing. And second thing is that I can accept anything as a valuable piece of knowledge if it is justifiable to my own, justifiable based on my own rationality. And then religion may not be. And I may not be able to understand religion as something which is a valuable thing, because it may not be totally comprehended by my own rationality. So I would love to quote one of 16th century philosophers, Blaise Pascal. I think he was a mathematician. Basically, he was a mathematician, and then he was a statistician, and the one who introduced the probability theory. And then he was a philosopher of fideism. Fideism is a kind of fides means faith. Faithism. We can count it as something in theology and something in philosophy too. And then he mentions that science is something which has nothing to say about the beginning and nothing to say about the end. And it knows something about the middle and claiming that it is the absolute. And Tirumeni, in one of the lectures when I was a student in 1990s, early 1990s, mentions that, you can see the inventions can be understood as explorations or discoveries of possibilities. Human beings are inventing new things, and then if the possibility was not created and hidden there in the universe, human beings wouldn't be able to invent that. So inventions are discoveries of the possibilities. So then that possibility was created by God. And then when we invent something, we can understand it as something we have explored, which was already there. And then I'm again quoting Saint Ephrem the Syrian that nature and scripture are two great fountains of the divine revelation. Scripture by the reading of it, nature by the use of it. The use of the nature in a responsible manner reveals the glory of God. That means whatever the science and technology are exploring, if we think that it is exploration of the principles and the possibilities which are hidden and created by God, then we can incorporate the thought of thought about God also into our mind through the advancement of science. That's what I think. I don't know whether the answer is very clear or not.
Thank you, Father, for making it very clear. I think we all understood in a brief manner as to what you wanted to say, and it's been well conveyed.
Thank you, Blessy, for that question. I think we have another one of our panelists raising a question. We have Eldhose with his question. Please go ahead, Eldhose.
Good evening, Acha.
Yes, good evening, Eldhose.
So basically, I have two questions. First question, Tirumeni mentions in the concluding part, page number 13, symbols of transcendence. So can you elucidate more on it?
Which one? Page number 13?
Conclusion, last para.
Yeah. Where is it? Which paragraph?
Last para, the ending para.
It calls for wisdom bringing the symbols of the transcendent from the religion into the heart of the culture.
Yeah. What exactly is the symbols of transcendence?
Yeah, as symbols of transcendent from all religion into the heart of the culture. I think it is symbolic. Some symbols are always there, symbols of the transcendent. Transcendent God is not totally understandable. And then Eastern religions used to use symbols of the transcendent, not without totally analyzing and without totally comprehending. There is a scope of and accepting what is not totally analytical and what is not totally understood. And then that is a peculiar characteristics of a religion. That means accepting certain things which without total analysis and without totally comprehending the idea of knowledge. That means without being a justified knowledge. But justified knowledge, justification of knowledge through human rationality is something which the modern system demands. And then here, without justification, through symbolic expressions. One of the things which Tirumeni used to highlight is that Western mind always understood truth as propositional. But East understood truth as the absolute, and then it is expressed and it is communicated through propositions, symbols, and many things which we are experiencing in one way or other. Propositional, that means truth is something which we must be able to express as in the form of ideas and in the constructions of language. That is one understanding of the West according to Tirumeni. If it is true, we must be able to present it as in a proposition. That means in a statement or in a group of statements, in a collection of statements. But in the Eastern understanding, it is quite different. Truth is the absolute, and then we can understand it through propositions, symbols, and many other things in this in our experience of life and many things which we are experiencing. So then symbols of transcendence also is there. It is transcendent God, and then transcending the human rationality is quite an important thing also. That is what I understand from this one. That is what I think it is mentioned here, basically.
Thank you. Thank you.
And here it is mentioned that normally human beings prefer to trust in themselves and not depend on God. Our civilization embodies that human attitude of rebellion and unbelief, and it calls wisdom, bringing in symbols of transcendence from other. That is the last line of the paragraph. That is a problem which I have already mentioned, and transcending that is quite an important thing. Transcending the overlayings on human rationality.
Okay, my other question is, in pluralistic model of societal governance and functioning.
It's not very clear to me. Could you repeat the question?
Is it fine if we come back to you, Eldhose? Because I think we have
Okay.
a question from our audience. Okay, all right. So we have an anonymous question from the audience. Tirumeni highlights about secularism and religion going hand in hand, but every religion depends upon a set of traditions which cannot be compromised. Therefore, it lies as a obstruction to secularism, which prompts one to ask the practicality of such a view. Is it practical that secularism and religion can go hand in hand?
Secularism and religion going hand in hand, I don't know. Secularism is one of the major forms of secularism is secular humanism. And secular humanism always denies any significance of religion. And secular humanism demands to consider humanity as to be served, and then to replace humanity, and then the role of religion, the role of God in religion is to be given to humanity. That's what secular humanism demands, and that was the most prominent system of secularism in 20th century. And then here secularism is not simply one single entity or one single approach or perspective of political or social system. It contains different degrees. Like secular humanism doesn't allow religion to function in the society itself, and then that began to function as a separate religion. But general secular perspective in political philosophy or political understanding is that the whole polity and the government has to function totally separated from the government, so from the religions, and religion has to function as a private business. I have already mentioned it. And then here, religion is, the more the religion is made private, the more religion becomes rigid. That is what he mentions, I think. That's what the question is mentioned. The more the religion is privatized, the more religion is rigid, and the more the religion began to develop into a kind of separated sector group of people, keeping themselves with separate interests, and then counting themselves as counting the religion as their major identity, a major aspect of their identity. And then here that tie is to be a little bit loose, and that's what Tirumeni says. And then religion has to develop a consciousness that the purpose of religion is to keep the humanity connected to God, and to keep the humanity connected together, and to keep the humanity connected to the whole nature. And there considering my religion as a mark of identity alone, will be a little bit diluted, and then we will be able to consider religion as subserving the whole humanity to keep it connected to God. So then secularism and religion going side by side. Of course, secularism in a way accepting all religions, or becoming a platform for all religions to function and to serve the humanity, with their own ethos and their own goodness. That will be a good approach. But secularism, when it is coming into a way that if it develops an approach, it comes into a way that it itself is developing a kind of organized system, excluding the religions, keeping the religions away, excluding the religions. It is dangerous. That is what the Tirumeni says.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering that question. We have one more question from our viewers. One of our MGOCSM members, Mr. Ashish, has put up a question. Dropping secularism and bringing religion to the forefront for discussion.
Dropping secularism?
Dropping secularism and bringing religion to the forefront for discussion and adjustment in the society to remove fanaticism would require a lot of perceptual change in our society. So question basically is that what are the latest developments and policy changes in Sunday school curriculum for this? And like he states that Sunday school teachers should also be trained in order to have this perceptional change. So
that's really a challenging question for me.
yeah.
being the person in charge of the OSSA UOKR. And of course, we are revising the curriculum of Sunday school, and then we are keeping this thing also in mind. And then, of course, we will try to introduce a new system in Sunday school, not simply dumping a lot of information about many things which about the church, about the Bible and all those things, but we will try to introduce certain values into the minds of the people and into the minds of the students who are studying in Sunday school, to be good human beings, to be good persons with responsibilities to about others, and to keep their connect, to keep on growing in communion with God too, and in communion with the others too. And then we will be careful in doing that. Thank you for prompting me for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acharya. We'll come back to Eldhose for one final question, and then we'll wind up the session. Right.
So my question is, in the end of the article, Tirumeni advocated for a pluralistic model of society governance, where all religions take part in a accommodative fashion to draft policies and governance. But my question regarding that is, how would inherent contradictory values of different religions will be reconciled or resolved for a uniform execution of governance and values? So before even giving advice that what's the position of a pluralistic from a religious point of view, how can all the religions come to a terms and agreement and consensus on the values? Because some of the values of different religions are inherently contradictory, I must say. So, for example, we can see in the current dispensation of the government.
I understand the question. I think I understand the question.
From the religious lens, but then some religions contradict on basic values. So, first, how will the religions itself then come to a consensus about the values?
I think the answer is already mentioned there in my presentation, and then after that, while answering certain questions, secularism has to function as a platform for all the religions to function freely in their own within their own scope, but not as a totally secluded systems. And then, but doesn't mean that one religion has to be allowed to over-dominate the whole society with the religious values and religious ethos and religious regulations. And it is clear that all religions are having something good to contribute to the humanity. And then the secular system of polity has to function as a platform for all religions to be together. And then when religions and people who are following different religions are given chances to interact each other, and then there happens a cross-cultural and a cross-religious communication, and then I think mutual respect will be more enhanced, and then the system will be better than what is happening now in a mono-religious community. Tirumeni is opposing a mono-religious political system. And then what's happening in the Arabian countries, where Islamic religion is the dominant force, and then it is controlling politics, and then the religious ethos is totally dominating the political system there. And in America, of course, America is considered to be a secular country. Tirumeni mentions America also. Then in America, the Christianity is considered as the major religion, and then in Europe, mostly secularism is prevalent, but in America, still Christianity is very powerful. Then it's better not to have a mono-religious community, but better to have better the secular political system function as a good platform for religions to interact and then to contribute together to the humanity as a whole for the betterment of the humanity and their growth in communion with God, and then in mutual communion, and then all the other to keep all the other healthy aspects of the whole society. That is what I have mentioned earlier, and then I'm repeating that.
Since I think we have a lot of questions today, there's one last question that we'd like to put up, and our panelist, Ms. Blessy, would want to put up the question, I think, next. Last question.
I'm sorry for taking the time. I just have this question based on Tirumeni's writing between philosophy of science, that it's on page number 12. It says that the philosophy of science, the neat distinction between fact and value began to come into prominence. So what is your take into that?
In the philosophy of science, the neat distinction between fact and value began to come into prominence. Science or pure reason, according to Kantians and neo-Kantians being concerned only with the fact and not with the value. Yes, I think I didn't mention anything about the value and the fact. Here, Tirumeni is very clear about mentioning that the fact is something which can be explained using a rational mind, or something which we can scientifically explain and scientifically justify, or we can justify using the methodological systems. This is an argument which began to echo in the European mind in 17th century. David Hume, one of the greatest philosophers of the medieval period, or maybe the modern philosophy, modern, not the contemporary, but maybe we can count him modern. He says that, if you take anything of a piece of metaphysics or divinity in hand and verify whether it is logically justifiable or mathematically justifiable or empirically provable, and if it is yes, you accept it, otherwise commit it then into flames. That is what Tirumeni is mentioning here. If you cannot accept anything, if you cannot mathematically prove something, you can accept it as a fact. And if you can logically prove something, you can accept it as a fact. And if you can empirically prove, you can accept it as a fact. Otherwise, put it into flames and commit it then into flames. That's what he mentions in his in his work. If you cannot prove anything empirically, mathematically, or logically, you don't need to add any value into that. And then the values of human beings cannot be counted as something valuable. Value will become valueless in the idea of this perspective. And then facts are something which we can prove mathematically, empirically, or logically. And if we cannot prove any value, that means the compassion, love, and then all these values, and respecting others' freedom, and all those things is these values. And if you cannot prove it, it has no place. The value has no value in the society if it cannot be proven. And there, law enforcement became important. That is what we are seeing. In the European and in the Western societies, law enforcement is so powerful because the value is totally absent, because of the overlayance of the humanity on human rationality. That's what I think here. Value, and I hope the difference between the value and the facts are understood. Fact is something which you can measure, you can prove, and then you can justify the meaning of it. And value is something which is beyond that. Value can neither be proved mathematically, logically, or logically, or what's it called, empirically. Then value is valueless in that regard. So that is to be changed. That is what Tirumeni says.
Thank you so much, Acha. Again, I think we have asked so many questions today, and I always feel that the more questions we ask, that means a lot of people have read the article, and the message has gone through to a lot of people. And we are still discussing about the articles that Tirumeni have written in the year 1992. They're still being carried on, and in 2022, we're still discussing, and it's a huge success in itself. So I really appreciate it.
That makes Gregorios very unique. And then I hope we will discuss
exactly. Through these articles, his spirit lives on even today in us youngsters. And I really, really appreciate you, Acha, for taking out the time and being so patient with all our questions. And you were always smiling throughout all our questions, no matter how difficult the questions may be, you're always smiling and you've been there answering the questions so patiently. To conclude, I would like to invite the Vice President of MGOCSM Delhi Diocese, Reverend Father Cherin Joseph, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Febha. Adding to Febha, Tirumeni's article is still very relevant, because when I was going through the article, what I could, conclude it in a capsule way was that Tirumeni wanted us, the 21st century, 2022 MGOCSM members, to maintain our health, to become a good a person with good body, the humans with a good body, and to be educated to become a good humanity, and politically empowered, so that we could become a good society. That is what I could gain from this article in a very small capsule way. And this evening was very wonderful, because as we all know that it's very difficult to understand what Dr. Paulos Gregorios Tirumeni says. And Jossi had made it, really, really simple and easy to understand, especially for tomorrow's church. We all are tomorrow's church, especially the MGOCSM members. You are tomorrow's church. So in order to understand what Tirumeni says, Achan used his resources. I could see that Achan was using all those, taking out the names of all those philosophers. So I don't know whether our youngsters would understand or would know them. But really, you should go back to this YouTube link again and again. You should listen to this class or this session once again, and you should try to comprehend what Achan wanted to say about this article, which Gregorios Tirumeni had written some 20 years ago. And with this, I would come to my today's duty to say a word of thanks to our very dear and respected Jossi. As you all know, that our church is going to elect 7 new bishops, and Achan being the principal of one of our seminaries, Achan is really busy with that. And all our Achans and Tirumenis are praying hard for this upcoming event. So out of this tight schedule, Achan could take out time, and Achan could come to us, virtually between us with the MGOCSM Delhi, from the bottom of my heart personally, and also on behalf of MGOCSM Delhi Diocese, and also on behalf of Metropolitan Dr. Johann Dimitrios Tirumeni, we extend our heartfelt thanks to you, Achan. Thank you very much for coming for this program and explaining and throwing light, elucidating what Dr. Paulos Gregorios Tirumeni said through this article. Thank you very much, Achan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Achan. I count it a pleasant privilege for me. It's a proud privilege for me. Thank you.
I also want to thank our panelists for the day, and also the audience, that is MGOCSM Hostcast, and everyone else who's watching through the YouTube platform. I wish you all a very good night. Thank you so much, everyone.